The first lie didn't hurt. What hurt was how easily she said it while looking straight at me. I remember the exact second it happened because my body reacted before my brain did. A tightness in my chest, like something vital had just been misfiled and I wouldn't find it again. We were standing in the kitchen. Normal night. Tuesday. She said she'd be late because of a client call that ran long. Her voice was calm, practiced, almost bored. And for the first time in 9 years of marriage, I felt like I was listening to a stranger rehearse a role she'd already perfected. My name is Daniel. I'm 42. I work in risk assessment, which is ironic because I spent years ignoring the biggest risk in my own house. I believed in patterns, probabilities, logic. I believed I had chosen well. Emily was smart, sharp, admired. The kind of woman people trusted instinctively. The kind who smiled at waiters, remembered birthdays, sent thank you notes. The kind you never imagine betraying you because she looks too put together to be careless with something so ugly. That night, I watched her leave through the hallway mirror. She adjusted her hair twice, put her phone face down on the counter, took her purse, then hesitated, came back, and switched it to her other shoulder. Small things. Meaningless things. Except they weren't meaningless anymore. They lined up in my head like numbers that finally balanced after years of being off by a decimal. I didn't follow her. I didn't check her phone. I didn't text. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the faint coffee stain she'd promised to clean 3 weeks ago. I realized something in that quiet. Trust doesn't break loudly. It erodes. And once you notice the erosion, it's already too late. Emily came home close to midnight. She kissed my cheek, said sorry, said she was exhausted. She smelled different. Not perfume. Something sharper. Something intentional. I nodded, said it was fine. I watched her walk into the bedroom without asking about my day. That was new too. I didn't confront her because confrontation assumes there's still something to save. What I felt wasn't anger yet. It was assessment. I started replaying the last 6 months like surveillance footage. The late nights that never matched calendar deadlines. The sudden interest in clothes she never wore for me. The way she'd lock the bathroom door just to check a message. The way she'd laugh at her phone and then look up guilty, like a kid caught stealing. People think betrayal announces itself with drama. It doesn't. It arrives politely. It sits across from you and eats dinner. The next morning she told me she might be traveling the following week. Chicago. Training. She said it casually, already halfway to the door. I said okay. She didn't notice my eyes. That was another change. Emily used to read me too well. Now she assumed I wasn't reading at all. I went to work and didn't get a thing done. My mind built timelines instead. If Chicago was real, there'd be an email. A booking. Something external. Lies require infrastructure. Truth barely needs maintenance. I checked nothing that day. That was deliberate. I wanted to see how far she'd go without pressure. People reveal themselves fastest when they think they're winning. That evening she brought home takeout and talked too much. Over-explaining. Filling space. I listened and nodded and cataloged. I asked no questions. Questions make liars careful. Silence makes them sloppy. When she went to shower, her phone buzzed on the couch. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The name flashed briefly on the lock screen before the display went dark. Just a first name. Mark. I leaned back and closed my eyes. There it was. Not proof. Not yet. But a shape. Something solid enough to build around. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathing settle into sleep. I stared at the ceiling and felt something harden inside me. Not rage. Control. I understood then that whatever was happening wasn't a mistake. It was a decision she was making every day. And if she could decide to betray me so calmly, I could decide to respond without mercy. I didn't know how yet. I only knew this wasn't going to end with a fight or tears or apologies. It was going to end with clarity. The kind that costs people everything they thought was safe. And as I lay there, inches from the woman who had already left me without leaving the house, I made one quiet promise to myself. She was going to finish this story thinking she was in control. She was wrong. The morning after I made that promise, everything looked the same and felt completely different. Emily made coffee like always, humming under her breath, scrolling through her phone with one hand while buttering toast with the other. She asked if I wanted eggs. I said no. She didn't notice the change in my voice because she wasn't listening for it. She was already somewhere else. I drove to work and realized I wasn't angry. That bothered me. Anger would have been easier. Anger is loud and sloppy and burns itself out. What I felt was quieter, heavier. like a weight settling exactly where it belonged. I started with memory, not digging, just laying things out flat. When she started dressing better, when she stopped asking about my day, when she suddenly needed space at night but still wanted the security of sleeping next to me. I thought about the way she'd started correcting me in public, subtle little jabs, like she needed to shrink me to justify whatever she was building elsewhere. At lunch, I checked her company website. Training in Chicago was real. That much was true. 3 days. Mandatory attendance. A clean lie always has a clean edge of truth. That's how professionals do it. I didn't look for Mark. Not yet. I wanted to see how she'd move if she thought I was still asleep. That evening, she told me she'd be late again. Team dinner. I smiled and said okay. She kissed me longer than usual, like she was paying a toll. I watched her walk out and waited a full minute before I moved. I didn't track her. I didn't follow her car. I did something simpler. I checked our shared credit card statement. I hadn't looked at it in months. Emily always handled bills. I trusted her. That trust ended quietly. There it was. A charge from a hotel downtown. Not expensive. Discreet. Paid 2 weeks earlier on a night she'd said she crashed at a friend's place after drinks. I remembered that night. I'd even offered to pick her up. She said she was already in bed. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. My hands were steady. That scared me more than shaking would have. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This was confirmation wearing a polite mask. She came home around 11, cheerful, relaxed, talking about coworkers I barely knew. I asked her how dinner was. She answered without missing a beat. She was good. Better than I ever gave her credit for. In bed, she reached for me. That was new too. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I'd just been blind. I let her touch my arm and felt nothing. No desire. No warmth. Just a clear understanding that she was managing optics. I turned away and said I was tired. She paused for a second too long before rolling over. I felt the shift beside me, the calculation. She was adjusting her approach. The next day, she left her laptop open on the dining table. That was either a mistake or a test. I didn't touch it. I walked past it like it didn't exist. Power doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing when to wait. By the time she left for Chicago, I had a timeline, a name, and enough restraint to scare myself. I watched her pack. She was careful with her clothes, folding certain outfits separately. I knew which ones weren't for training rooms. At the door, she hugged me and said she loved me. I believed she believed it. That was the most disturbing part. People don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as exceptions. When the door closed behind her, the house went silent. Not lonely. Empty. Like a stage after the audience leaves. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Not to spy. To prepare. There's a moment when you stop asking why and start deciding how. That moment had arrived. I wasn't going to expose her yet. Exposure is messy. Emotional. It lets the other person rewrite the story. I wanted something cleaner. Something final. By the time she landed in Chicago, I had already taken the first step. And she had no idea the ground under her was already cracking. By the third day, the silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling useful. Emily texted me photos from Chicago. Conference badge. Hotel lobby. A plate of food that looked untouched. Proof of life. Proof of effort. I responded with short, neutral replies. Safe words. Nothing that could be screenshotted later and turned against me. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was building a record. I requested access to our joint cloud storage under the excuse of backing up family files. She approved it within minutes. That told me everything I needed to know about how confident she felt. People who think they're invisible stop checking shadows. I didn't dig through everything. I searched by dates. The human brain is predictable. When people hide something, they remember when it mattered to them. That's where the cracks are. There were folders I didn't recognize. Work-related names. Generic. Inside one of them was a single PDF. Travel reimbursements. Clean. Boring. Except for one line item that didn't match the Chicago dates. A hotel in our city. 2 nights. Same one from the credit card. Same week. Different excuse. I closed the file and took a breath. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't sad. I felt precise. That evening, I went out alone. I didn't tell anyone where. I walked until my feet hurt and my head stopped racing. I needed to be sure this wasn't about winning. Winning implies a contest. This was about restoring balance. About refusing to be quietly erased from my own life. Emily called that night. Video. She wanted to see my face. I answered. I smiled when she smiled. I matched her tone perfectly. She talked about meetings, complained about coffee, said she missed our bed. I nodded and asked just enough to keep her talking. She didn't notice I wasn't sharing anything back. When the call ended, I sat in the dark and realized something unsettling. I knew her tells now. The way her eyes moved when she improvised. The pause before she reassured me. The forced softness. I wondered how long she'd been using those tells on me without me seeing them. The next day, I met with a lawyer during my lunch break. Not for divorce papers. Not yet. I asked questions. Hypotheticals. Financial exposure. Asset protection. The lawyer didn't flinch. She'd seen this before. That helped. It made this feel real instead of dramatic. I transferred money from our joint account into a separate one. Not everything. Just enough to ensure options. I documented it cleanly. Transparent. Legal. I wasn't stealing. I was stabilizing. Emily texted me later, said she might extend her trip by one night. Networking opportunity. I told her to do what she needed. She replied with a heart emoji. I stared at it longer than I should have. Symbols are easier than honesty. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. When she came home, she brought me a gift. Something small. Thoughtful. Something that would have melted me 6 months ago. I thanked her. I kissed her cheek. I asked about the flight. She answered smoothly. We sat on the couch together, close but not touching. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I felt the weight of it and nothing else. No comfort. No belonging. Just information. She was reestablishing normal. Later, when she went to shower, I checked the trash. Not her phone. Not her laptop. The trash. Receipts tell stories people forget. There it was. A valet ticket from a restaurant I knew. A place we'd never been together. The date matched the hotel charge. I washed my hands carefully after. I didn't want her to smell paper on me. That night, she slept quickly. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling again, but this time I wasn't lost. I was ahead. I knew the shape of what was coming. I also knew something else. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd underestimated me. And that mistake was going to cost her more than the affair ever could. The next phase wouldn't be about evidence. It would be about timing. Timing changes everything. A truth delivered too early gets argued with. A truth delivered too late loses its power. I needed the moment when denial would collapse under its own weight, when her version of events wouldn't survive even a second of daylight. Emily slipped back into routine like nothing had happened. That was her strength and her weakness. She believed consistency could overwrite guilt. She cooked. She laughed at the right moments. She asked about my work again, just enough to look engaged. I answered with half-truths. Neutral facts. I became boring on purpose. People don't look closely at things that don't excite them. I watched her closely now, not with suspicion but with curiosity. I noticed how she checked the hallway mirror before leaving the house. How she'd step outside to take certain calls, even when the reception inside was better. How she'd come back lighter, almost relieved, like she'd just unloaded something heavy somewhere else. Mark's name stopped appearing on her lock screen. That didn't reassure me. It confirmed adaptation. When people think they've been noticed, they don't stop. They evolve. One night, she mentioned him casually. Slipped his name into a work story like it had always been there. That was intentional. Normalization is a tactic. If I reacted, she'd know. I didn't. I nodded, asked a vague follow-up, then changed the subject. I watched disappointment flash across her face for a fraction of a second. She wanted friction. I gave her air. At work, I started asking different questions. Quiet ones. Background checks don't need hacking. They need patience. Mark Reynolds, 36. Project manager. Divorced. No kids. No criminal record. A pattern of short-term relationships that overlap just enough to raise eyebrows. The kind of man who didn't mind being hidden as long as he was chosen. I didn't hate him. That surprised me. He wasn't the problem. He was the symptom. Emily didn't fall into his arms by accident. She walked there. I ran scenarios in my head at night. Confrontation. Exposure. Walking away without explanation. None of them felt right. Each one gave her something. Closure. Justification. A story to tell later where she'd be the misunderstood one. I didn't want to be part of her story anymore. So I started writing my own. I volunteered for a temporary project out of state. 2 weeks. Just enough distance to shift the dynamic. I told Emily over dinner. She looked startled, then supportive. Too supportive. She said it was good for my career. That she'd miss me. She reached for my hand and held it longer than necessary. I let her. Distance reveals priorities. I wanted to see where she leaned when I wasn't there to steady her. I left on a Monday. The house felt cleaner without us both in it, like it had been holding its breath. The first night away, she didn't call. She texted once. A photo of the dog sleeping on my side of the bed. I replied with a thumbs up. I imagined her staring at the screen, waiting for something more. On the third night, I checked the credit card again. Same hotel. Same charge. Different room number. I closed my laptop and went for a run. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. The pain grounded me. It reminded me I was still in my body, still in control of something. When I came back, there was a voicemail from her. Slightly slurred. She said she missed me. Said the house felt empty. I listened twice. Not for words. For tone. She sounded careless. Comfortable. That hurt more than anger ever could. I returned home early, unannounced. Friday afternoon. I parked down the street and walked the rest of the way. I don't know what I expected. Panic. Guilt. Some cinematic reveal. What I got was silence. The house was empty. Clean. Too clean. Fresh towels. New sheets. A candle burned down to wax in the bathroom. Evidence of effort. Of preparation. Emily came home an hour later. She froze when she saw me. Just for a second. Long enough. You're back early, she said, smiling. Flight changed, I said. She hugged me. Her body was warm. Relaxed. Not the posture of someone caught. The posture of someone confident. That night, lying beside her again, I understood the real danger. Not the affair. The contempt. She thought she was smarter. Thought she could manage both lives indefinitely. Thought I was a fixed variable. I stared at the ceiling and felt the last trace of hesitation leave me. The window for mercy had closed, and I knew exactly when to end this. Once you decide there will be no mercy, things get very simple. I stopped wondering if she loved me. Love wasn't the point anymore. Respect was. And whatever we had once built together, she dismantled it quietly, piece by piece, while smiling in my face. You don't negotiate with someone who's already decided you're expendable. Emily grew bolder after that. Not careless, but relaxed. Like someone who thinks the worst is behind them. She started staying out later without elaborate excuses. She stopped checking in as much. It was like she believed I'd been successfully trained back into my old role. Predictable. Safe. Blind. I played it perfectly. I cooked dinner. I asked about her day. I laughed at the right moments. I even touched her more. Not out of desire, but strategy. People don't question danger when it wears familiarity. Inside, something in me had gone completely cold. Not numb. Focused. I could feel it in how I spoke, how I listened. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was measuring. The real shift happened when she mentioned Chicago again. Said there might be another trip coming up. Same tone. Same casual delivery. She was testing how much truth she could remove without consequence. I told her she should go if it was good for her career. That surprised her. I saw it in her eyes. She'd expected resistance, maybe a little insecurity. Instead, she got permission. That was the moment she stopped being careful. The next week, I took a day off work and didn't tell her. I stayed home, moved quietly, watched the house like it was no longer mine. I opened drawers I'd never opened before. Not searching. Inventorying. In the back of her closet, behind coats she never wore anymore, was a small overnight bag. Packed. Not rushed. Thoughtfully arranged. Toiletries she didn't use at home. Underwear I hadn't seen in years. I zipped it back up and put it exactly where it had been. No rage. No shaking. Just confirmation. That night she left after dinner. Said she was meeting friends. I told her to have fun. She kissed me and left without hesitation. No guilt. No pause. I waited 10 minutes, then drove. I didn't follow her directly. I knew where she'd go. Patterns don't lie. The hotel downtown again. I parked across the street, far enough not to be obvious. I wasn't there to confront anyone. I was there to see her choice in real time. She arrived smiling, talking on her phone. She didn't look around, didn't scan the street. She walked in like she belonged there, like this life was already hers. I sat in the car and felt something inside me finally break cleanly, like a bone snapping in the right direction. Any remaining doubt died right there. I didn't watch her go inside for long. I didn't need the rest. I already had more than enough. I drove home slowly, thinking about logistics instead of pain, thinking about sequence. When she came back later that night, she was relaxed, almost cheerful. She said the evening ran long. She didn't bother adding details. She was past that phase. I looked at her and realized she hadn't asked a single question about me all night. Not one. She didn't care what I'd done, where I'd been, or how I felt. I was background noise in my own marriage. That's when I knew the ending couldn't be emotional. Emotional endings let people pretend they were misunderstood. This had to be surgical. The next morning, I scheduled 3 appointments. One with my attorney, one with a financial advisor, one with HR at my company. I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. Systems exist for moments like this. Emily texted me around noon. Said she loved me. Said she was thinking about us taking a trip soon, reconnecting. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I typed back that we should talk soon. She added a heart. I felt nothing, because by then, the plan wasn't forming anymore. It was finished. And she was still smiling, still lying, still completely unaware that every move she'd made had already locked her into the ending she thought she was controlling. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop hoping someone will change. I slept better than I had in weeks. No dreams. No looping arguments in my head. Just quiet. The attorney was first. A woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and no patience for drama. I didn't tell her a story. I gave her facts. Dates. Transactions. Patterns. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she nodded like she'd already seen this version 100 times. Don't confront her yet, she said. You only get one clean exit. Do it right. I'd already decided that. The financial advisor came next. I learned how fragile shared money really is when one person stops pretending it's shared. Accounts can be separated quietly. Assets can be documented without alarms. You don't need permission to protect yourself. You just need timing. HR was the easiest. I framed it as contingency planning. Hypotheticals. No details. They told me what options existed if my personal life suddenly required distance or flexibility. I thanked them and left. That afternoon, I went home and watched Emily move through the house like everything was still intact. She talked about work, about stress, about nothing. I noticed how often she mentioned the future now. Trips, renovations, plans. She was investing in fiction. I nodded. I agreed. I made mental notes. That night, she tried harder than usual. Cooked my favorite meal. Opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving. She touched my arm when she laughed. Stayed close. This wasn't guilt. This was maintenance. In bed, she reached for me. I let it happen. Not because I wanted her, but because I wanted clarity. There's something revealing about intimacy when you're no longer inside it emotionally. Every move felt rehearsed. Every sound slightly delayed. She wasn't with me. She was performing for the idea of me she still needed. Afterward, she fell asleep quickly. I lay there staring at the wall, counting breaths that no longer mattered to me. The next morning, she left early. Chicago again. This time she didn't even pretend it was tentative. She had her bag ready. Confident. Efficient. I watched her drive away and felt nothing but resolve. The house felt different once she was gone. Not empty. Honest. I opened my laptop and began backing up files. Photos. Messages. Financial records. I wasn't collecting evidence for revenge. I was documenting reality. There's a difference. I found things she'd missed. Small inconsistencies. Deleted threads that weren't fully gone. Hotel confirmations saved under work emails. She wasn't as careful as she thought. People rarely are when they believe they're in control. Mark showed up more than I expected. Not in words. In timing. In overlap. In decisions that suddenly made sense once you stop lying to yourself. I didn't message him. I didn't stalk him. I didn't need to. He was already woven into the fabric she'd been tearing. That evening, Emily called from the hotel. Her voice was light, distracted. She talked about meetings, about room service, about missing me. I responded with just enough warmth to keep her comfortable. Comfort breeds mistakes. Before we hung up, she said something that sealed it. I'm glad we're in a good place again, she said. I closed my eyes and smiled into the phone. Me too, I said. When the call ended, I booked my own ticket. Not to follow her, not to catch her, to be exactly where I needed to be when the truth finally surfaced. Because endings aren't about confrontation. They're about control. And by then, she had already given me all of it. Control doesn't feel like power when you first take it back. It feels like silence. Like standing in a room after the noise stops and realizing how loud it had been the whole time. I didn't go to Chicago. I went somewhere quieter. A place where decisions could be signed without distraction and plans could be locked without interference. I checked into a small hotel, turned off notifications, and spent 2 days finalizing things I should have done months ago. Paperwork has a way of stripping emotion out of betrayal. Names become entries. Years become numbers. Promises turn into clauses. By the end of the second day, my marriage existed only as a legal structure waiting to be dismantled. Emily texted often. Photos of the city. Comments about meetings running late. Jokes that landed flat. I replied slowly. Short sentences. No questions. I could feel her adjusting, trying to recalibrate the version of me she thought she knew. On the third night, she didn't text at all. That was new. I didn't panic. I didn't imagine scenarios. I knew exactly what silence meant. It meant she was present somewhere else. Fully present. The next morning, I received an email from the bank confirming the final separation of accounts. A clean break. No alerts sent to her yet. Just confirmation that when the moment came, she wouldn't have time to react. I drove home that afternoon. The house greeted me the same way it always had. Neutral. Patient. Like it had been waiting for me to catch up. Emily came back late that night. She looked tired. Not exhausted. Satisfied. The kind of tired you get after everything goes according to plan. She kissed me and went straight to the shower. I listened to the water run and realized something important. She wasn't hiding anymore. She didn't feel the need to. Over dinner, she talked about Chicago like it had been a vacation. Mentioned restaurants. Laughed about coworkers. Not a single mention of stress. Not a single slip. She believed the lie had become permanent. I told her I had news. She leaned in, interested. Still curious when it benefited her. I might be taking some time off, I said. Reevaluating things. She smiled. Encouraging. That could be really healthy for you. For you. That phrase stayed with me. Later that night, while she slept, I stood in the doorway and looked at her like a stranger. I tried to remember the version of her I'd trusted completely. The one who used to tell me everything. That woman felt fictional now. A character she'd played convincingly for years. I didn't wake her. I didn't need to. The next morning, I sent one message. Not to her. To Mark. It was simple. Polite. Unemotional. We need to talk. You don't know me, but you should. He replied within minutes. About what? I didn't answer right away. I let the space stretch. Let him sit with the question. About the woman who thinks neither of us is paying attention. There was a long pause after that. Long enough to tell me he hadn't expected this version of events. He finally responded with a single sentence. I didn't know she was married. I stared at the screen and felt something close to amusement. Everyone lies. The only question is who they think deserves the truth. I wrote back. She is. And she's coming over tonight. That did it. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. What do you want? I set the phone down and went to make coffee. I wasn't in a rush anymore. For the first time since all of this started, I was ahead of the moment. When I picked the phone back up, I typed the last line for the night. I want you to see the ending from the inside. And for the first time, I knew the next move wouldn't belong to her. The night Emily arrived, I felt no tremor, no surge, no anticipation. Just a methodical focus. I'd prepared for every possibility. Every excuse she might offer. Every denial. Every attempt to charm or manipulate. I was ready. She walked in carrying her overnight bag, smiling, unaware. That smile was the last defense she had, and I intended to remove it. I didn't greet her at the door. I let her hang her coat, set down her bag, settle into the living room. She glanced at me occasionally, the way someone checks a mirror to make sure everything looks normal. She believed I was still the man she could bend with a glance, with a laugh, with a sigh. She was wrong. I poured a glass of wine and sat across from her. She tried small talk. About work. About traffic. About weather. I let her talk. Every word was a thread in the web I had woven. I didn't speak. Not yet. Just listened. Cataloged. Measured. Every detail mattered. Then I stood and walked to the shelf. Slowly. Purposefully. I removed a folder, sleek and professional looking, and placed it on the table. She froze mid-sentence. Her eyes flicked to it. That slight shift told me she recognized its significance, even if she didn't know its full weight. That tiny crack in her composure was all I needed. I sat back down. No explanation. No accusations. Just the folder between us. Her fingers hovered over it. Her smile faltered. The room suddenly seemed smaller, tighter, the air thick with expectation. She said nothing. She couldn't. She had no control here. Inside the folder were dates, names, locations. Photos, documents, emails, bank transfers. Every move she had made, meticulously tracked and stored. It wasn't sensationalized. It was undeniable. Cold, hard evidence. The life she thought she had hidden was now visible, displayed with surgical precision. The power had shifted. She realized it, even before she opened the first page. Her hand shook slightly as she picked up the top sheet. Eyes widened. Lips parted. She tried to smile, to regain footing, but it was useless. She was cornered, and she knew it. For years, she had danced around the truth, manipulated reality, and assumed no one could see her. Now reality had returned the favor. I didn't speak. I let her read. Let her digest. Let her panic silently behind perfect composure. This was not about revenge. It was about equilibrium. She had upset the balance for years. Tonight, the balance returned, as precise and lethal as a scalpel's cut. After several minutes, she looked up. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for a signal, an out, a hint that she might wriggle free. There was none. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. The room was mine, the moment mine, the truth mine. Finally, she whispered, voice trembling but trying to maintain authority. This can't be real. I leaned back. Calm. Measured. It is. All of it. Every detail. Her breath caught. She went pale, realizing the magnitude. She tried to speak again. I held up a hand. Silence. That silence was louder than any accusation, sharper than any scream. It was the sound of a life unraveling, thread by thread, under the watchful eye of someone who had finally stopped believing in lies. She sank into the chair opposite me, hands pressed to her face. Trembling, I could feel the years of deceit collapsing into that moment. And still, I said nothing. She had to live through it, understand it, own it. Only then could the reckoning be complete. Outside, the city lights flickered through the blinds, indifferent. The world hadn't changed. Only the equation inside these four walls had shifted. She realized, her choices, her betrayals, her arrogance, all of it had been cataloged, analyzed, and neutralized in a way she could not escape. And that was just the beginning. She cried after that, quietly at first, then harder, like grief had finally found a place to land. I watched without sympathy. Tears don't erase intent. They don't rewind choices. They just signal that the illusion has finally collapsed. When she spoke again, it was fragmented. Half confessions mixed with excuses. She said she felt invisible. She said she never meant for it to go this far. She said Mark understood her in ways I didn't. Every sentence started with I. Not once did she say my name. I let her finish. People reveal their true priorities when they're defending themselves. She wasn't apologizing. She was negotiating. I slid another document across the table. This one thinner. Cleaner. Divorce papers. Her breath caught. She stared at them like they might bite. You planned this, she said. Yes, I answered. There was no anger in my voice. No satisfaction. Just truth. She asked when. How long? What else I knew? I answered selectively. Not because I had to, but because she didn't deserve the full picture. Control isn't loud. It's precise. I told her I'd already separated the accounts. That my attorney would be contacting hers. That the house would be listed. That timelines were set. There would be no dramatic scenes, no social media confessions, no rewriting history. The story would be boring. Legal. Final. That scared her more than yelling ever could. She stood up abruptly, pacing now, trying to regain motion like movement might restore agency. She said she loved me. She said she wanted to fix things. She said she'd end it immediately. I looked at her and realized something important. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She was afraid of losing the version of her life where she got everything without consequences. I already ended it, I said. With him, she asked quickly. No, with us. That was when her anger surfaced. Sharp, defensive. She accused me of spying, of betrayal, of emotional abandonment. She needed me to be guilty too. People can't stand being the only villain in the room. I didn't argue. I let the silence stretch again. Silence forces people to sit with themselves. Then I stood and picked up my phone. She stiffened. I dialed Mark and put the call on speaker. He answered immediately. Is she there? He asked. Emily's face drained of color. Yes, I said. She's right here. There was a long pause. No one spoke. Then he cleared his throat. I didn't know she was married, he said again, weaker this time. Emily lunged for the phone. I stepped back. I sent you the marriage certificate, I said calmly. And the photos from our house. You knew. He exhaled. Emily, you told me he was controlling. That you were basically done. She sank back into the chair, exposed from both sides now. No narrative left to hide behind. I'm done with both of you, I said. This call is just for clarity. I ended it before either of them could speak again. Emily stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as a husband. Not as a safety net. As a consequence. I told her she could sleep in the guest room until she found somewhere else. I told her the timeline. 30 days. No exceptions. She nodded mechanically. That night, I packed a bag and left. Not because I was running. Because the final step didn't require proximity. As I drove away, my phone buzzed once. A message from Mark. You didn't deserve this. I didn't reply. Because the story wasn't over yet. And the last part wasn't about her at all. I woke up the next morning in a small rental I'd arranged outside the city. Quiet, neutral, free of history. The weight I'd carried for months, the suspicion, the anger, the calculations, was still there, but it felt different now. Sharper, distilled. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was purpose-fulfilled. I checked the news. Nothing. The world didn't notice. That was fine. The reckoning had been private, surgical, complete. Emily's reputation at work had already started to unravel. By the time anyone else knew, the evidence had been shared with the right people, documented and undeniable. Promotions she thought were secure were withdrawn. Invitations vanished. Colleagues whispered. Friends kept their distance. Every network she had relied on fractured quietly, invisibly, leaving her isolated. I didn't watch it happen. I didn't gloat. I let it occur as naturally as a tide. Actions have consequences. Some people never learn until the effects hit. Emily would feel it, in full, because she had forced the hand that controlled the outcome. And I had ensured it was unalterable. Days turned into weeks. I rebuilt. Slowly. Gym in the mornings, runs in the evening, projects I had abandoned, friendships I had neglected. Everything I touched felt lighter because it was mine. No compromises, no betrayals, no lies. I even started meeting someone new, someone calm, someone real. She wasn't a replacement. She wasn't revenge. She was a reminder that trust could exist without fear, without strings, without manipulation. I checked my phone less and less. Emily tried to reach me. Emails, texts, even calls, but they went unanswered. I didn't need closure. I had clarity. I had control. I had peace. A month later, I went through the apartment one last time. Pictures, mementos, memories, all carefully packed and stored, artifacts of a life that had been real, but no longer mine. Emily would come and go, adjusting to a new reality, one that didn't include me. I didn't hope she learned. I didn't hope she suffered. Justice doesn't need an audience. It only needs precision. I drove away from the city that night and didn't look back. The road ahead was empty. I felt the tension in my shoulders dissolve, the weight in my chest lift. For the first time in years, I was free. Free from lies, from deceit, from manipulation. Free to rebuild, free to trust again, free to live unafraid. And somewhere in the quiet of that freedom, I understood the ultimate truth. Betrayal shapes you, but it doesn't have to define you. Revenge can be cold, meticulous, and unrelenting, but it only matters if it restores balance. I didn't destroy Emily because I wanted to hurt her. I destroyed the lies she had built to protect herself from accountability. I destroyed the illusion that anyone could control me or get away with it. The silence of that final night was not emptiness. It was a beginning. And I drove forward, knowing one thing with absolute certainty. I survived it all. And I would never let anyone make me a fool again. The past was gone. The lesson was learned. The future was mine.